For those of you who don't, for those of you who don't know me, I'm the president of Now This Year, and we always begin our workshops and events with a land acknowledgement and inclusion statement. We begin by acknowledging that we are in the Robinson Superior Treaty Territory and that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and specifically the Fort William First Nation. The Northwestern Ontario Writers' Workshop welcomes all persons, those of ages, faith, political affiliations, of all races, all genders, those with disabilities, and those within the LGBTQIA plus community. We will not accept or tolerate discrimination or hate speech of any kind. We are listening and learning to improve our organization and to provide a safe and inclusive space for all. Tonight, we have the privilege of having Sandi Bouche with us to do a workshop. Sandi, as you may know, is an internationally recognized and much loved speaker. She's from the First Nations, the Seine River First Nations in Northern Ontario, Canada. She's an author, activist, and advocate for both Indigenous and self-determination and Canadian reconciliation. But first and foremost, Sandi claims to be a storyteller and has the ability to tell a story that not only increases our self-awareness, but our awareness of others as well. She uses many techniques like metaphors and analogies and covers quite complex concepts. The whole purpose is to create a listener who never feels, well, actually, who feels shared for what they did and what they previously did not know or understand. She's conversational, and what's terrific, at least from my perspective, is she's makes her home in Thunder Bay, where she says she enjoys spoiling her grandchildren every chance she gets. I had the opportunity to speak with Sandi a little bit before the meeting tonight, and I found her wonderfully open and conversational, seems to have a great sense of humor, and I'm sure we'll all enjoy what she has to offer us this evening. Sandi?
Awesome. Which I just had to make sure I wasn't on mute, because anyone who's done Zoom anytime, you're going to have that happen. So as mentioned, I do have a presentation that I'm just going to run through, and then at the end, we're going to have a question and answer period. So hopefully if questions come up during the presentation, hopefully the presentation will answer them for you. If not, I'm happy to answer any questions at the end. As mentioned, and thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, I work in the area of Indigenous empowerment and Canadian reconciliation, so really don't worry about your question. Whatever it is, I've probably heard it before, and I'm happy to listen and help you understand whatever that answer might be. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here and just hang in as I go through this scary blackout period that is always like, is it going to work? Is it going to work? Oh, it worked. Okay, awesome. So the title for my presentation, as you saw in the advertisement, is The Reasons to Write Nonfiction or Memoir Style in an Authentic Voice. And that is literally absolutely everything to me. So we're going to jump right in. As mentioned, I am Anishinaabe, so I am an Ojibwe woman from Seine River First Nation. I work full-time as an inspirational speaker, and I have for 13 years now. So before COVID, I used to travel from coast to coast across Canada, working primarily in First Nation communities or with non-Indigenous government departments or agencies or entities that want to work with Indigenous people. I am a best-selling author, and we're definitely going to be talking about that tonight. I am what I call an Indigenous actionist, which means I'm all about the action. It's not just words, it's what we do with those words and what actions we follow them up with. You may see me on Shaw Community TV, on Shaw Spotlight. I've been a host on there for probably 4 years now. And as mentioned, when I'm not doing all of that, I'm a mom to 2 grown children, and I have 2 amazing grandchildren that I spend as much time with as possible. Next slide. So tonight we have quite a few things I want to run through. First and foremost, I really want to share the story behind the books, because when we're talking about a memoir, I think that's everything, that story, that what brings you to that point in time where you think this needs to become a book. I'm going to mention specifically the intent behind each of my books. We're going to look at my thoughts around editing and publishing, and that's a whole area in itself. What risks did I take along this journey, and do I regret those risks? And why have I continued in this style now for more than a decade? So first and foremost, we're going to talk about the story behind the books. So as my mom would say, it's all puzzle pieces. If there's one thing, I don't know if anyone here is an avid puzzle person who likes to put those puzzles together. If you are, all the power to you, but I can honestly say I don't understand you. I am not a puzzle person. I don't understand why you would take a perfectly good picture and cut it up into 500 pieces and then ask me to put it back together. That doesn't make sense to me. But to my mom, it did. And it was actually a metaphor she used for life on a regular basis. If we went to her with a problem and we were hoping that she would help us with some information, she would always consider our question and then answer with, "It sounds like you need more puzzle pieces." And as she explained it, if you're working on a 500-piece puzzle and you only have 10 pieces, they're not going to look like they match. They're not going to look like the colors are together or anything like that. And it could lead you to wonder, why did this even happen? Why did I meet this person? Why did I need to learn this lesson? But if you gather more puzzle pieces and even more, they start to fit together. And that's definitely how my journey has played out. So as I mentioned before we started tonight, I started off in the small little Northern Ontario town of Hudson. There was 400 people in the community when I lived there, and 6 of us were teenagers. We had 2 stop signs, and we were incredibly proud of that fact. We were a booming metropolis as far as we were concerned. I am the very proud daughter of a beautiful Anishinaabe from Couchiching First Nation. My mom had an Indigenous worldview. She looked at the world and animals and trees and the water through that lens. And growing up in the house with my mom meant that we were asked one question at least daily, if not more often. And that question was, what did you learn? I can remember coming home from high school and always she was there to ask, what did you learn? And she didn't mean math. She wasn't talking about the history lesson. What she wanted to hear is, what did we learn about relationships? What did we learn about the person we were? What did we learn about the world that we're operating in? My mom always challenged whoever she was talking to go deeper, to look for that deeper meaning, not just the superficial, obvious answer, but what did it mean to you? What is the lesson here? What did you learn? And in the house was also my dad, a proud and strong Frenchman from Saint-Jérôme, Quebec. And he was easily my biggest fan. My mom worried about what my life would be like as Anishinaabe because she knew how challenging it could be to be an Indigenous woman in Canada. But that's not what Dad saw when he saw me. He saw my straight A's. He saw a daughter that he was incredibly proud of. If my dad said I walked on water, I believed him. My dad happened to believe I could be prime minister one day if I wanted to be. And it was just this absolutely beautiful environment to grow up in. But from a very young age, and I would guess to be around 6 years old, is the first time that I noticed the world treated my parents incredibly differently. So I grew up, or I was born in 1964, so I'm talking about around 1970. And I can remember my dad walking into a store and whoever worked there or the store owner or manager, whatever, was always, "Hi, Leo, how are you doing? Are you having a good time?" But if my mom walked in and she made the mistake of walking in a little bit too far behind Dad, so maybe they didn't know they were together, she was often met with a scorn or these awful faces that they didn't want her in the building. And that confused me as a child because I knew how amazing my mom was. So from a very early age, I understood that people had different views than what I knew to be my reality. And that's important because it plays into my work and into my books. Now, as I mentioned, my dad, I had this amazing relationship with him. And if you had known me in like grade 6, 7, and 8, you probably would have described me as a very confident young woman. But in retrospect, I now know I wasn't confident at all because I didn't have a belief in myself. I had a belief in my dad. And if he said I could walk on water, well, then I believed him. I now describe my dad as my first projector, just like the kind we use in seminars or workshops to project the image up on the screen. He projected an image of me and I believed him. But I was only 17 when my dad passed away and the projector went out. And that's when I made the fatal mistake that so many people make. I went looking for another projector because I didn't yet realize that I could be my own projector. So life goes on as it tends to do, even when horrific grieving moments happen. And my life had a lot of beautiful moments and incredibly challenging moments. So many years of my life were lost to violence and alcoholism in my family and in my home. Children came and went into the family and out of the family. Anyone who follows my career knows I'm a 10-year domestic abuse survivor, and I refer to those now as the dark years. I had amazing friends and amazing elders that seemed to always be there just when I needed them. As an Anishinaabe, I had my teachings and my customs, and I always had powwow. I had many, many moments of reflection where I just sat silently wondering what this puzzle piece meant. But through it all, there were two things that were absolute constants in my life. The first one was my mom. No matter what happened, whether it was good or bad, I knew I could always pick up that phone and she was always going to answer. And if I was in a dark place, she was always going to have the words to help me remember how strong I was. My mom honestly believed that her job was to get her children to believe in ourselves. She didn't want us believing in her because she explained it. She wasn't going to be here for our entire journey. And in fact, we were the only ones that were going to be here from start to finish. And so she felt it was incredibly important that we learned to believe in ourselves. And the other thing that was an absolute constant in my life for as long as I can remember is my writing. I have said a million times that I think it would be easier for me to give up breathing than it would be writing. I was the young girl with the diary that had the little lock on it, that my brothers believed it was their mission in life to break open that lock and read my diary. As I got older, they became journals. Eventually, I moved on to the computer. And to this very day, it's still something that I do every single day. My writing helps me make sense of my world. And then everything changed on September 28th, 2005, when a puzzle piece I did not want was handed to me. My beautiful, amazing, strong mom did not survive heart surgery. And she went from joking around with the nurses to gone. And I can honestly say the time period that followed that was incredibly dark. I don't remember a lot from that time except for the overwhelming grief that seemed to weigh down every thought. And I don't think I did much writing in that time either. But eventually, once the grief started waning and I started to come back to life, the one thing that came to my mind was my mom's stories. Those stories she would tell us when we'd go to her with a problem, those stories that she would tell us that made us believe in ourselves. And suddenly I became fearful. I was afraid that my mom's stories would die with her. And I knew her stories, my daughter knew her stories, but somehow that seemed selfish, that we couldn't be the only two that knew them because they had the potential to help so many people. So in the middle of all that grief and darkness, I sat down and in a very panicked way, I started writing my mom's stories. And now I just want to touch on what that journey was like. So as I mentioned, I'm now using a computer at this point, and I am frantically writing. It was not an enjoyable experience. It didn't even really feel like a choice. I was so terrified that if I took too long, that I would forget these stories. I felt it was my mission and my responsibility to record them. So every single day I sat at my computer and I typed and I wrote and I continued over and over and over until one day my daughter showed up. Now I want to point out at this point, I was not thinking about how I'm going to publish this book. I was not thinking about how I'm going to sell the books or get them out to the people. I only had that one mission in mind. I had to get mom's stories down so that they didn't die with her. And even more important than that was I had to do it in mom's style, which I now understand is Anishinaabe style. So to explain that to you, in a more Western style education, there's a teacher and there's a student. And the teacher has the knowledge and everyone knows that, and the student doesn't have the knowledge, and we all acknowledge that. The teacher teaches, the student absorbs, the knowledge is transferred. That is not Anishinaabe style of teaching. We teach using our stories. So say, for example, if I knew you needed some information, I'm going to casually share a story with you, and hidden in the story is the information that you need. That way you never have to acknowledge that you needed the information. You never have to ask. I can just share it with you and you can take what you need without ever having to announce it. And that's how I wanted to write my book, that I would tell these stories knowing that I wouldn't know who was reading them. I wouldn't know what they needed, but I had that faith passed to me from my mom that they knew what they needed. And as long as I shared my stories, they would take from it what they needed. So as I mentioned, my daughter showed up at my home one day and I was quite excited at this point to share with her what I had been done. We were now into 200 pages of this book. And I sat her down at the computer and showed her my work. And after she read quite a bit of it, she turned to me and announced that she thought it was really good. She thought this was amazing. She definitely supported the idea of me turning this into a book. But she said, Mom, there's a serious problem here that you need to do something about. I had no idea what she was talking about. So I asked her what she was referring to. And she kind of smiled in the way that me and my daughter joke around. And she said, Mom, it's on your computer, which is in your bedroom. Are you going to invite people into your bedroom to read the book? Like, how exactly are you getting this out to the people? So I thought she had a valid point. There had to be some way that I started to introduce this book to people. So she introduced me to this crazy thing that you might have heard of called Facebook. I had never heard of it. I had no idea how to use it. She created a profile for me. She created a group. Back then there wasn't even pages. This is how long ago this happened. She created a little group for me and she showed me how to post in the group. And she suggested that I go into the group and I post something every single day, just a little bit. As she said, don't give them the whole book, just give them an idea of what you're doing. So I thought it was kind of funny at first because I'm literally typing to myself. There's no one else in the group. But after a couple of days, there was 4 people in my group. And for those of you who were along for the journey, my brothers had shown up. And then after a while, there were 10 or 12 people. My cousins had shown up. But after about 4 or 5 months, I had 400 people in my group. I didn't know 400 people. So I started looking at the friend list and I realized what was happening. It was someone my brother used to work with that he had told about this group, or someone who knew my daughter, and on the group kept growing. But if you're going to come up with a book, you're going to have to talk about publishing at one point, and you're going to have to talk about things like copyright and editing. And I had some very definite ideas about those things. But again, Facebook was about to save the day. Because remember, I told you about that group I had, the 400 people that eventually became 700 and even bigger. One day, I got a message from a woman in the group that I didn't know at all. I couldn't see how she ended up in the group. I didn't know who she was related to. And she asked me if she could give me a call. And she understood that might make me nervous. So she said, you know, if you want to block your number, I totally understand that, but it's really important that I talk to you. Now, honestly, because my book does touch on domestic violence in a couple of places, I honestly thought it was a woman in trouble and that she needed someone to talk to. So of course, I absolutely agreed. Yes, I'll take your call. She called about an hour after that exchange, and I'll never forget it because all she said is, I'm a publisher and I want to publish your book. So now we had to discuss those things I was talking about. And the first one that came up was copyright. I was adamant, and this is a personal thing, and I totally want to acknowledge that. For me, it was essential that I own copyright on my books. And that is because it was my mom's stories. And there was no way I was giving anyone else ownership of my book. And that's a huge issue for a lot of publishers, but my publisher was willing to listen. And after some hemming and hawing, okay, she was okay with that. And then we got into the next one, which was editing. I had this vision in my head of some non-Indigenous man, nothing personal to the non-Indigenous men in the group, but that's a different worldview than an Indigenous woman. And in my mind, I didn't want a non-Indigenous man to have the power to edit my words. I was terrified that after all these changes, it wouldn't even sound like my mom anymore. Anyone who's read my books, they're written in conversational English, which means it's not always the proper sentence structure or grammar, but I'm repeating a statement the way my mom would have said it if you were sitting at her kitchen table. So I was adamant that I was choosing the editor, and I actually hired a woman here locally in Thunder Bay, and she was amazing. She came in with the most beautiful attitude. As she put it, there were some things that she was really going to push back on that she was positive I should change. There were some things she knew we would negotiate, and there were other things that at the end of the day, I just had final say, and she was just going to back down. It took us quite a while, but we worked through the book. Now you can imagine at this point, now my publisher's pushing back huge. You want to keep copyright, so I can't have it. You want to do the editing, and that's my team that normally does that. So her pushback was that she was not going to promote my book, nor was she going to pay for the printing. I thought it was a pretty good deal. In February of 2010, Honorary Indian was released to the public. It is a daily motivational guide, which literally means there's a story in there for every single day, 365 stories. These are literally the stories of my life. At no place in there am I saying, this is my mother's teaching, here it is, because that wouldn't be my mother's style. And I don't have the right to tell my mother's story. So I told my story and ingrained her teachings into the words. Bottom line, as was my intent from the get-go, I was empowering the reader to take what they need from the book. And at this point in time, this Honorary Indian, you can see it's quite huge. It's also available in the local library system for those who are at chapters or on my website. But I wanted to share with you the foreword from this book because I think it really encapsulates that intent. An Aboriginal heritage is not mandatory to enjoy the example and the gift of the inner strength, the resolve, the humor, the joy of the First Nations people. So in line with one of my most cherished teachings, the medicine wheel teaching, I share with you now all that I am and all that I know, so that the colors of man can come closer to completing the circle. This book and the writings it contains were created with one simple purpose in mind: to remind you that you, no matter your heritage, upbringing, or skin color, are indeed a warrior who has survived monumental hardships. It is my hope that by reading my words, by walking a mile in my moccasins, you will begin to see the strength and peace contained in your very soul. And slowly, you will begin to embrace and understand your abilities as you conquer your fears and emerge as the person you were destined to be. I am not an elder, but I am a strong and proud Anishinaabe who is compelled to share all that I am, so you too can find the inner peace, the strength, the contentment that I experience every single day of my life. I am not an elder, not one of the wise ones who has learned many things along his or her long life path, but I was blessed to be the daughter of a very wise and strong woman. My mother had a beautiful smile, a laugh from the soul, and a voice that hinted of the immense wisdom held in her heart. But my mother was raised in a time when the opinions of women were unheeded and the words of an Indian unimportant. Yet she spoke to me and I listened. My mother taught me to see the teachings in every face, in every situation, in every accomplishment, and in every hardship. She taught me how to calm my soul and how to revisit my life without condemnation. She taught me to learn, to laugh, to live, and to love. So now I invite you to walk through my life, to explore the teachings as they came to me, to analyze as I reflect, to become an honorary Indian. Some passages are written directly to you as if we're sitting together sharing a pot of tea. Others are simply of me walking slowly through the days of my life. I don't know who needed to read a certain passage or when. Rather, I just knew I had to write it. It is my hope that as you read and see how I view my world and those around me, you will begin to uncover and see the teachings in your own life and experiences. With practice, I have no doubt you will also begin to experience the solace, clarity, strength, understanding, and peace that make up my world. Some passages I pray will touch your very soul, while others may not. Don't worry if this happens, for as the elders explain, you will hear what you need to hear at this stage of your life. Continue reading, skip a page if you feel the need, or return to read a passage as often as you like. Trust that the Creator will guide you to the words you were meant to read. But don't be surprised if you gather more understanding with a second or third reading. Time will have passed between your visits, and by rereading, you will come to understand that the passage hasn't changed, but you have. So my friend, from this moment on, you are an honorary Indian, one destined to live a life of inner strength and power in the tradition of the majestic warrior, one gifted to learn, grow, and appreciate the teachings held in every single breath, in every face, in every day. So stand tall, my friends, stand proud and stand strong, simply because you are. Honorary Indian. But almost as soon as the book came out, and I laugh about this because that's how I felt at the time, I realized Mom didn't fit in one book. Almost as soon as it hit the stage and hit the bookshelves, it was, wait a minute, I forgot to tell them this story and that story, and what about this teaching? So Honorary Indian was out, and it was soon followed in the summer of 2013 by Her Mother's Daughter. The same style, the same publisher, the same deal. This completes the story of my mother's teachings. And the most important thing about this book is the title. Because you see, my mom understood that dark skin of hers and how people reacted to it. Not everyone, but at that time, quite a few. And when I was young and she was trying to protect me, she noticed that I wasn't as dark as my brothers. So she used to tell me, don't tell people about me. Tell them you're your father's daughter, meaning let them believe you're French. It'll keep you safe. I was so proud of my mom and all of her teachings. And anyone who knows me knows I'm not really good at listening and doing what I'm told. So this book is Her Mother's Daughter, because I absolutely refuse to be ashamed of the woman she is. So the foreword on this book, just so you can see the difference. 5 years ago, in a Brampton apartment, the idea was born. And I reached for the doorknob and slowly began to open the door. 4 years ago, I began to share my message and my mother's teachings with the world in the form of my daily inspirations, and the door opened wider. The newspaper articles, the door opened wider still. The website wider. The first book encapsulating my life and my mother's teachings wider. Now each day I gaze upon the world through the door that I began to open long ago. Helpers constantly walk in. Their names are inspiration, excitement, opportunity, and gratitude. The sun is shining all the time thanks to that open door, and I'm so happy that I chose to take a deep breath, put my faith in Creator and my vision, and open the door that led me to today, to the here and now, and the simple fact that I love you. For those that follow my online posts, you know that I end every single one of those posts with, I love you. I know that you know that it's sincere and that those words come straight from my heart. I may not know you personally. In fact, most that follow my writings are not in my circle of personal friends, but I often think of the people that read my words. I wonder if you're smiling and reading them on a good day when you have time to spare, or if you're struggling and reaching out for some form of support and understanding, even if that support or understanding comes from the words of a stranger. No matter, rest assured that I do think of you often. And as I go through my day, I often wonder what words of wisdom I can put into written form that will assist you to have an easier, if not brighter, day. I make a point of writing down teachings as they come to me so that I can relay them to you later. Perhaps in some small way, I can help you along your path. So if nothing else, my friend, today rest assured that you are never alone. For in a northern city, in a small apartment, there is this woman that spends her days concerned about and caring about you. And that woman is me. Then, so now we're talking summer 2013, and the conversation, the national conversation is changing. Outlooks on things are changing. I'm still working in Indigenous nonprofit. I'm working in the communities, but I'm starting to hear whispers and conversations I had never heard before. And these conversations are all around reconciliation, Canadian Indigenous reconciliation. The problem was the people having the conversation. Because in the beginning, all I was seeing was non-Indigenous politicians on Parliament Hill talking about what they thought it was going to take to reconcile with Indigenous people. And I can honestly say at that point in time, I was so frustrated that I felt like I wanted to climb on the roof and scream out to the country that you are asking the wrong people. That the Indigenous people were the harmed people, and in any reconciliation, it is not the person who did the harm that decides how this is fixed. It's the person that was harmed that gets to a point of healing where they understand what they need to move forward. I knew I had to say something. I knew that the Indigenous voice was missing from this conversation. I also met so many amazing non-Indigenous people who wanted to be part of the solution, who wanted to be part of the change, but who had no idea what to do. They were scared stiff to say anything because they didn't want to cause more harm. They didn't want to offend anyone. They were nervous to add to the problem, but they wanted to do something, and no one was giving them any guidance. So I sat down and wrote The Path. Communication strategies for the reconciliation era. It is literally the action plan moving forward. It's an easy read. There's cartoons in here. It takes about a day to read it, but I've had people that read it in one day and then also read it 8 times because it quickly becomes a resource manual. It's not a long history lesson, because honestly, I don't think that's going to help. It's just a guide to help you understand what conversations are going on and how you can be part of them. This book actually starts with a poem that's called This Time. I sat in front of your pain as tears and memories and fears flooded from your veins onto the floor we shared. But I didn't hear you. I was too busy, worried about what to say or what to do. I was so desperate to be there for you that I wasn't. But in some strange way, it seems I did hear you, not in the way you needed, not in the way you begged for, and I'm sorry for that. But I heard you in a haunting way, in a I have never forgotten that moment way. You stayed with me, your tears and memories and fears along with my failure, until she sat in front of me as tears and memories and fears flooded from her veins onto the floor we shared. But this time I heard her and you. This time, both my mouth and my mind were silent. This time I gave her the floor and my focus, for this time I knew all that was needed of me was to hear. And finally, I think I did. I pray I helped her. I pray I calmed her fears, for it wasn't me, but you who paid the price for her healing. But rest assured, if you were ever to trust me again, if ever you were to sit before me again, sharing your tears and memories and fears, this time I would hear you. And then, last but not least, this summer, the release of I Am Awake. And honestly, I put so much love and intention, and I was so picky with this book because it had been a while since I released a book, and I wanted it to be the best I had ever released. And I love that the finished product is definitely Honorary Indian. The teachings and the reflection in the first book meets the reconciliation work of the path. But this time, how it came to be was totally different. Unfortunately, thanks to lockdown and COVID restrictions, my publisher closed up shop. Now I was looking at what am I going to do? And I realized I now had the power and the ability to help local businesses get back on their feet. So this book is created entirely locally. I wrote the content. The beautiful cover is designed by Shout Media, and all of my printing is done at the local UPS store. It's a complete and total Northern Ontario effort, and I love that this book is being so well received by so many. And by the way, it's huge. It is absolutely huge. What it is a collection of my most popular blog posts. I do a daily blog. My most popular blog posts over 3 different years. So I just wanted to share. Now you can see the journey. It starts with a note from the author. Here it is, my friend, a choice selection of blog posts shared over the past 3 years. These are the posts that I originally shared on my Facebook page as you and I began our days together. These are the ones you asked me to put in book form, and I finally did it. These posts illustrate my journey as a Kwee in Canada, dancing between my activism and reconciliation work and my own personal healing. Reviewing them, editing them, making sure that you received only the best of the best made me smile, because once again, it meant I got to spend time with you. And again, as always, I pray my words help you on your journey. I pray they help you to remember how strong, how wise, how beautiful you truly are. And if they don't, then send me an email or give me a call so we can talk. Travel well, my friend. travel safe, and please never forget, I love you. So that's the story behind the books. So what was the intent behind each book? Well, it's actually the same intent for all four. And this is a teaching. This is something my mom used to make me and my brothers do on a regular basis. She would literally get us to stand in the middle of the room back to back. And then she would speak to me and she would get me to look around the room and she would point out and help me realize that I could see so much of the room, but that there was one part of the room I couldn't see, the part that was directly in front of my brother. And that my brother had such an amazing view of the room and he could see so much, but the part he was blind to was obvious to me. That was my intent with these books. The fact that as an Indigenous woman, I can see things that others can't, in the same way that you can see things that I can't. But I can go to any library or any school and I can get the teachings of Western society. It's still not as common to hear the Indigenous perspective, even though we all benefit when we share our stories. Now, for me, it was never about fame. It was never about how many books I can sell. It was never about awards or recognition. It was about honoring my mom's teachings. In Ojibwe culture, we have a teaching that says, with the gift comes responsibility. I have the gift to be able to write. I have the gift to be able to speak, which means I have the responsibility to do both. My responsibility is to honor the eagle feather I believe Canada is carrying. On one side, helping non-Indigenous people to understand what reconciliation is about, and on the other side, helping First Nations people to heal and stand strong and be able to use their voices again. What are my thoughts on editing and publishing? Well, I already shared my concerns with you, so I'm just going to sum it up in one statement. I believe there's so many options out there when it comes to publishing. There's a whole spectrum. I suggest that you choose whatever method works the best for you, as long as it never, ever compromises your authentic voice. Because if you're tempted to write, it's your voice that is needed in this time. That's just one of my teachings. What risks did I take? Well, the biggest one was the potential for sales. Remember, my publisher said that she was not promoting me and that she was not going to pay for printing costs. I was brand new in business. All of that promotion was going to fall to me and something I was going to have to figure out. Well, in Canada, if you sell more than 10,000 copies, you're classed as a bestseller. And all three of my first books are bestsellers. And based on sales of I'm Awake so far, I'm definitely not concerned about it. And considering Honorary Indian is still selling like crazy, I'm definitely not concerned. Why have I continued in this style for over a decade? I think this is probably the most important part of this presentation. I have continued in this style, because it's me. It's authentically me. And if you can't be yourself when you're writing your own memoir, then when can you be yourself? That's the requirement. That's the bar that's set. You have, this is your chance to share your authentic voice. And I hope that so many of you that are considering this actually choose to do it. So why do I believe you should write nonfiction in an authentic voice? Because as my elders say, your power is in your story, and only you have the ability to write it. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. And now we can go into the questions. Hopefully you enjoyed that. Yes, yes, I see smiles, I see nods. Okay, so far so good.
If you
Awesome.
have a question, just raise your hand or you can write it in the chat and I'll keep an eye out for both. And as Sandy chats away with you.
Awesome.
Oh, nobody's got any questions?
Oh, you're most welcome, Annette. Thank you for reaching out to me. That's so awesome.
You're very welcome. Yeah, I think I just wanted to ask you, first of all, say what a brilliant talk. I've heard you speak before, Sandy, and it's always a pleasure. I'm so glad I've got the opportunity to hear you speak again today. I think I'm gonna go right to the end and just say to you, I mean, how did you go around marketing your, you had the publisher came to you, that must have been such an exciting phone call to take that phone call. And when they said, oh, I'd like to publish your work. But how did you go about promoting your work? What strategies did you use?
Yeah, and for me, honestly, and I know it's getting slammed so much in the press right now, but for me, everything came from that Facebook group. That's where I built my following. They got to the point where they started their day by reading my blog posts. They came back every single day. When I would share that the book is now out, they wanted to get their copies. And what I loved the most, and I think it's probably the highest compliment I could ever receive, when I started selling the book, what would happen is someone would buy it, but then 4 months later, they'd come back and want to buy it again. And I was kind of confused, like, didn't we do this already? And every single time the answer was the same. I gave it to someone who needed it. It was never, I liked it and I thought they'd like it. It was someone needed it. To the same extent, right now, one of the examples, in every Indigenous women's domestic violence shelter in Ontario is my first book for the women who were staying there to be able to read it. So it's those kind of stories. It was word of mouth. And on top of that, keep in mind, I am an inspirational speaker. So at seminar, when I do a presentation or a speech, at the end, I always have my books there and they come over. I need this one and this one. Can you sign it? They want to share their stories with me. It's always like the session ends at 7 and I go home at 11, right? Which is, I love it. I absolutely love it because that's when the paths come together, right? That means it's resonating with people. So it was largely on Facebook and then from my live events, but my books have sold internationally now. I mean, the first time someone reached out from Ireland, I was like, what? And it's because she saw my posts and resonated. And in her words, you're telling my story, which I thought was interesting because at that point I had never been near Ireland. So yeah, you know what I think it is? And I'm going to reiterate what I said earlier, authenticity. Authenticity resonates with people because we live in a world where there are so many people that are not authentic. I don't care what your story is, but if you tell it in your truest voice, people recognize that and they gravitate to it. They trust you. They want to hear more because it's still so incredibly rare. And that's why it's like, don't do it my way, do it your way. How would you write it? That's where the power is. Awesome.
Sandy, I have a question. The bit at the beginning with your first book about keeping the copyright.
Yes.
Can you explain what process did you have to sign a special contract and what would have happened if you hadn't gotten that copyright?
Okay, so having copyright of your book means that's the person that decides, does it ever get changed? Can it be turned into poems and prints? Can it be made into a video? Like, let's get crazy. Can it be made into a movie? All of those decisions of what can be done with this book are in the hands of whoever owns copyright. Right. So that's why it was so essential to me that I own copyright. I want to put it out in audio form. I still haven't gotten around to do that, but I definitely want to do that. That's only person that can do that is the person that owns copyright, any kind of replication of the book comes with the copyright. And I just could, as I said, it's my mom's stories. There was just, I could not release copyright. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? Oh, there's one. Who's that? I can't. Oh, go ahead, Marge. You'll have to unmute.
There she is.
Yeah.
There she is.
Hi, Sandy. I was wondering if you are still posting through Facebook. Do you find that that is the best social media platform for what you're doing? Or have you tried Instagram or some of the other possibilities out there?
Okay, so I post on all of them. Just to put that out there now, but Facebook is where, now it depends on where you are. In Toronto, Twitter is the way to go. Everybody's on Twitter. So if I was in Toronto, that's what I would have to do. In Northern Ontario, if you're trying to reach individuals, it's Facebook, right? So that's why my group now has 1,600 people that read my blog posts every morning, right? So it just keeps growing and growing. And now that I talk about reconciliation, it grows even faster. So I do a lot on LinkedIn now, only because that's the business component, right? So that's businesses that want to learn about reconciliation. So that's why I do posts on there as well. But Facebook, when it comes down to individuals buying books, it always is fake. I get bookings for seminars through my Facebook page. So
Yeah. Is there any worry about copyright? Because I know with photography, there's a little clause with Facebook saying that they own anything that's posted on their site.
Yeah, and do I worry about that? No, honestly. And honestly, because what are they going to do? Reproduce a blog post? It looks horrible, right? The other thing you should just know about me, and again, this is very incredibly personal. I don't say it's going to work for everyone, but when I do a seminar, I tell everyone, if you see an image that I use and you love it, take the picture, use it, share it. You don't need to mention my name, because to me, it's about the conversation that will spark. So if someone wants to share a blog post and say it's theirs, honestly, after 13 years, people call them out. You didn't write that. I know who wrote that. Because, right, you have a style to your writing. People know. So, yeah, it's not anything to worry about. I would, if they are so desperate and loved it so much that they want to share it and own it, go nuts, right? Like, I hope it makes a difference.
How do you choose? I mean, there's a huge body of work. You don't want to give the whole book away. So how do you choose what you're going to post? And how long? Is there do you have a word count criteria?
And honestly, now this is where, keep in mind, I said it would be easier for me to give up breathing than writing. I get up in the morning, and people have seen me do this. Within 5 minutes of my morning coffee, those first sips of coffee, I write my blog post for the day. I have no idea what it's going to be before then. I did not write it the night before. It is whatever that reflection or inspiration that comes to me that day. And it probably has a typo in it. I'm totally going to be honest. I'll come back in an hour and fix the typo. But yeah. So, and that's what resonates with people, but it's my mom's teachings that are resonating. It's that reflection, that what is this day teaching me, right? So,
And you're doing that every day. You're doing
Every
a
day.
post.
every day.
That's hard. That must be hard to keep that momentum going. Wow.
No. And that's what
Awesome.
I mean. Like, honestly, if I didn't do that, I'd still be writing the posts. I just wouldn't be sharing them. I literally write every single day. I could not make sense of my world without, in the same way that some people journal at the end of every day. It's
Right.
the exact same thing, right? It's literally how I get all that stuff out of my brain and continue growing and learning. So
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Clayton.
Yes, Clayton, you have a
So your morning Is that a ritual for you? Is that how you get yourself writing? Or do you have other times of the day that you do writing as well?
I write now this is, I'm probably going to get crucified for that. Like there's all those writing classes out there that say, 1 o'clock every day, you sit down and do this. I religiously do that morning post only because that's how my brain works, but I will write anytime inspiration hits me. So I'm the person that has the notebook in my purse. I have done road trips where I've had to pull over to write something. My friends just know I can be in the middle of the restaurant. Out comes the notebook. They just go silent. She's had a thought, right? The treadmill. I don't know if anyone else does this, but you get on the treadmill. There's something about emptying your brain, right? So when you're not thinking, I get on the treadmill every time I got to get off to go write something, every single time. Shower, same thing. Get in the shower, 2 minutes later, no, I got to get out and go write something. So whenever anyone who's ever done this, I don't know, I assume you're all authors here and writers. If you don't write it when the inspiration comes to you and you try to do an hour later, it's not anywhere as good as the original. Because to me, it's like it's being dictated to me. It's literally grab a pen and how fast can you write this down, right? And if I've done it, the worst is right before you fall asleep. And you got to get out of bed to go write that, right? And it's like, but I don't want to, I'm so comfy, but I haven't. And then I regret it the next day. So yeah.
Just to that point, Sandy, I don't know if they're still there, but the local Indigo chapters had little ballpoint pens that you flick them and there's a flashlight at the end. And you put a notebook by your bed. And then you can just turn the pen.
I love that. I got a true story. My ex-husband actually installed a whiteboard in our bathroom so that I could reach out of the shower, write it, and actually finish the shower. I thought that was a supportive partner. He got it. He totally got it. So yeah, whenever it hits me. It's also one of the reasons I still live in Northern Ontario. I did live in Toronto for 5 years. You saw the Burlington reference in one of my books. In the bush, if I'm out at a friend's camp or something, I swear to God, I could write all weekend long. It's just when you get away from the noise and you're just in that beautiful silence, the line I always use, and I realize it's my teachings, my reference, but I can hear a creator talking when I'm in the bush. It's like nothing interrupts. And I have written full notebooks a weekend at camp. I'm a lousy company, I guess. If you want to socialize, don't take me or don't give me a book because but I've unfortunately, gone to a park and not brought note paper, but brought a book I was going to read. And some poor author, I'm writing all over in the margins of their book because I had to write down whatever thought I had. So yeah, it's a gift, right? We got to honor the gifts. We got to, we're lucky enough to be able to do this. So yeah.
Okay, any more questions from anyone? I don't see any.
Sure, I can toss up one.
Sure.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
This has to do not with the writing so much. I noticed that you're doing a podcast. Is that a daily podcast or a weekly podcast?
I don't do a podcast.
I thought I saw it somewhere in your literature.
No.
Oh.
I do a monthly event. It's called My Fire, if that's what you're referring to.
No, it's just my memory.
You know what? Maybe you found something old. I used to have a podcast. It was called Surviving Isolation. One hint what it was about, guys. Lockdown hit. I was home alone with no one to talk to. It's like, turn on the microphone. Hello, are you out there? How are you doing? I literally, and Shaw picked it up. They were nice enough to carry it, but once a week I was on there literally like, is anyone there? It was terrible, but
that's what I saw.
Yeah. And whatever works, right? You got to survive lockdown, whatever works. For the people that don't have questions, I don't mean to put you on the spot. I'm just, and you can always use chat if you'd rather not talk, but I'm just wondering what you thought of the presentation. Did it inspire you, or was there information that you needed to hear? Like, what did you think?
There's a note here from Leanne Fournier. It says, lots of notes taken, Sandy. Thanks so much. And so sorry again for my disruptive entry. No problem. Looking so
Puppies.
forward
We
to
love
reading the
puppies.
books.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Oh,
Puppies.
awesome.
Yeah. Oh, Vera has her hand up. Go ahead, Vera.
Hi, I'm sorry I was late. I was out at another event and I came in late. I'm sorry I missed the beginning. You said you do motivational speaking?
Yeah.
Do you do that on Zoom right now, or are you
I-
always in person?
No, actually, right now it's about half and half. I can't believe how fast live came back just in the last month. But for the last year, I was doing all Zoom.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah. And that's when I mentioned my fire, or my monthly event a little while ago. That's a monthly Zoom session that I do free. It's on reconciliation though. It's just basically, if you have questions, come on out and I'll help you understand it. So, yeah.
And on your Zoom events, do you find the turnout is good, and do people participate, or is it because they've chosen to be there, do you think?
Well, I definitely live my life in an echo chamber, right? You don't come out to my events if you're not into Indigenous empowerment or Canadian reconciliation. I acknowledge that. Or empowerment, like I do a lot of female empowerment as well. My personality, the participation's really high. I'm not going to let anyone stay quiet. So it's very interactive. We have a lot of fun. I'm totally going to send her someone out. I noticed Mark signed up today. He was actually a student of mine when I taught at Conn College. So he knows how I call on people. How are you doing over there? Are you enjoying this? So we have fun. I enjoy the work I do, and I would never want someone not to enjoy the time we shared together. So, yeah.
Well, maybe you should think about the podcast.
Me talking into my microphone. You know what? Honestly, I would totally do a podcast if it was with someone. Like the dialogue back and forth, even to discuss the news or bring in guests, but to do it on your own is hard. This is me talking to myself. So,
Well,
Oh,
technically you're talking to everyone. They're just not talking back to you.
yeah, exactly. So it's kind of like talking to my cat.
oh.
I could do a podcast about talking to my cat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Vera. Clayton's got his hand up again.
I'll just take that down.
Oh.
Oh, I did something else. That's good. What?
I
Anyway,
can take it down for you. There you go.
Thank you. This goes to your speaking. I discovered a long time ago that doing workshops and seminars is a great way to market books. How do you market your seminars, or do you go about getting your business the same way that you've been getting your books out there?
Pretty much the same way. So I worked before I started my business. So I've been in business for 13 years. Before I did that, I worked in Indigenous employment and training. So I worked with all the Indigenous agencies. I worked in First Nations communities. It's not like people didn't know me. Like, and I want to acknowledge that, because it's not like I came in from zero. People knew who I was. So when I came out with the book and designed my first seminar, and it's called A Day That Changed Everything, it's 100% empowerment and changing the way you look at your life. Those are the people that booked in the beginning. The people, the First Nation communities or the agencies. It's like, what is Sandi doing now? Right. And then honestly, like I do very little marketing. I'm on Shaw TV. That helps huge. I do Facebook ads, again, back to Facebook, because that's where my people are. But word of mouth is huge. If you do a good job, and again, I'm going to go back to authenticity. Let's put it this way, and I don't want to traumatize anyone here, and I hope I don't. In Honorary Indian, one of the entries is about the fact that I lost my first daughter to SIDS, sudden infant death, when she was only 2 months old. And it describes the morning I found her. I have received so many emails about that one post, and most of them are either from the mom who's been there that said, thank you for giving me the words. I can now send this to my family and they'll understand, because I could never tell them. Or it's from the best friend of the mom who was like, oh my God, I had no idea what she went through. Thank you for helping me to understand. So yeah, I do the same thing in my seminars. I touch on incredibly personal things, but I do it in a comfy, I use cartoons, right? I do it in a way that I'm going to create, my hashtag is I create safe space. So here you're not going to be judged for what you say or what you ask. We're going to work together. And that's how I built my career, is just doing that one seminar at a time. I have, so there's like 50 different seminars on my website right now. So, yeah. Annette, you're so cute.
I do Bill. Oh, yeah, my thing's on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you a little bit about, because it's very interesting to hear that you used local publisher. You know, you did it, the last book, The Path, I think it is, that you used local people. Can you just say a little bit more about that? Because I think that's really exciting.
Yeah, it was just, well, my publisher was gone. Let's keep in mind, that's where this started, right? It was like mass panic, what do I do? And at this point, I didn't need a publisher. My publisher had never promoted my work. So it's not like I was worrying about that. And I still wanted to own copyright. I still wanted to do my own editing. So I didn't want to go down that road again. And I knew other people now that had self-published, right? So I was like, well, what does that look like, right? Can I do that? So I reached out. The UPS store, David on Dunlop, knows how to register your book and get the IPSN number, right? He can do that for you. So I was like, what? Okay, what? And then Shout Media, I've worked with, they design my website. They do a lot of my like seminar posters and things. So I reached out to them and said, have you ever designed a book cover? Just wondering. And they had done it for Toronto clients. They hadn't done it locally, but they had before. So I was like, okay, here's the size of the book. Here's what it's about. Give me some ideas. So that amazing cover is all Shout Media. They did such a phenomenal job. And then David at the UPS store prints all my books for me. He went out and bought the huge book binding machine. So he prints a lot of books for a lot of people. And for me, it was just, you know, Shout got the money for doing the cover, and UPS is making money every time I sell a book. It was my way of community coming out of lockdown, right? Not just me, but let's do this together, right? So it just seemed like the right thing to do. And I knew cool people that knew how to do it. So, yeah. Yeah. I see Brian hiding there without a picture. Hi, Brian. Haven't seen you in ages. I know, Brian. Marlene, what did you think?
Hi, Sandy. I saw
There's
you were
Brian.
talking, so I had to tune in.
Awesome. Did you enjoy it?
I did. It's I never heard your story before.
Oh, wow.
Curious. I was curious as how you came out with the title Honorary Indian. It's a
And
new
now you
year,
know.
Indigenous yourself. So
Yeah.
what's honorary about it?
Yeah.
But it's whoever reads your book.
Yeah. It's who the reader is, right? So.
Right.
Yeah. Awesome.
So I learned a lot about your books and a lot about you, actually.
Awesome.
listening in. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Yes, Marlene, I'm totally centering you out. You're literally in the center of my screen, so I'm going to center you out. So yeah.
It's okay. I'm a Toastmaster veteran like Clayton is, so I'll soldier ahead. I'm also on your Facebook group. I've also worked almost 25 years for Shunya Wabidang, which is training and employment free. So, you know, I really related a lot to your thoughts about motivation, and I'm kind of never connected that with memoir and storytelling as, you know, lessons that I can kind of share in an entertaining way. I never really thought about that in relation to myself, but I am getting lots of gray hair.
It happens.
And in theory, if I retire, perhaps I'll have more time to write. So that was really intriguing because I really, you know, haven't really thought about memoir that much. I release my trauma in bad poetry normally. So this was, and see, I was really torn because this is on the same time as Anwa's poetry night.
Yeah.
And I was really torn, but I'm like, no, because I've seen so many of your posts. I read so many of them after I've had my coffee when I'm supposed to be working on some training project. Don't tell my boss, I could still get fired. So, you know, I guess I had some questions which are, you know, when I look at creative nonfiction pieces, their stories and their stories about me, because I'm very careful about not wanting to. I'm a member of Lox Qualums in BC, but I've lived in Treaty 3 territory forever, but I always say I don't speak for Treaty 3. So I'm really careful not to do that. But sometimes the stories that when I'm reflecting back, you know, because I don't want to mention other people's names, they come out oddly, I guess. They're all about me. And really there were other people there, not just supporting characters. So how do you handle that if you're telling a story?
My interpretation of what they said or how I thought they were acting. I make it crystal clear. And I love, by the way, I gotta like just totally honor your humility. It's beautiful the way you shared how you've lived in Treaty 3, but it's not, you don't speak for them. Humility builds bridges. So I just love the way you put that. But that's the way I do it, is that it's my interpretation of what they're saying or doing. So it's still coming through my lens and my interpretation. So like, it's not carved in stone. I can't tell their story. And I make sure I don't. In fact, Honorary Indian here, you guys are going to be let in on something that nobody knows. Honorary Indian's actually going into rewrite, because there are some entries in that book that should not be in that book, and they involve my children. And it's one of the things that my adult, like Annette, when you were saying you brought down the pictures earlier, in the same way, my children have come to me and said, Mom, like, hello, like, why are you sharing this? And I totally honor that. And because it was written in such a time of grief, and I was just kind of like getting everything out, I know why it ended up in there, but I'm not in that space now. So I have to rectify that. So I'm going to go back, and there'll be a second print, and there's just certain entries that won't be in the second book for that exact reason, right? So, yeah. I hope that answered your question. I include other people, I just through my lens, right? So, yeah.
Vera has her hand up again.
Yeah.
Vera always has her hand up.
Awesome.
That's
I have
great.
a question.
That's great.
Yeah, I have a question about the UPS situation. So this is the UPS in Thunder Bay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, given that UPS can ship anywhere, that means that anyone in Ontario could probably order through that same bookbinding service.
I'd be willing
And
to
end up
bet.
with-
Now, yeah, the only thing I would advise, be careful, is because originally, when I had my publisher and I was working with my publisher, she actually used to do my printing for me, even though I paid for it, she did the printing. Books aren't light. Let's just
No, I
put that
know.
out there, right? We're not selling balloons.
Mhm.
So even though she would give me a really good deal on books to ship, she was in Mississauga, to ship the books from Mississauga to me, now I might as well have been paying double locally. Now, David gives me an incredible price on my books, and that way I don't have to, like with her, I'd have to order like 1,000 books, and then you're worrying about storing them and taking up space, and it's just horrible. Whereas David, it's way more point of sale, right? I can order like 50 books at a time kind of thing. So he does an amazing job. He's going to kill me if I keep telling people this. You now have 500 books to print. But yeah, he does an amazing job. And why, like, it is local. I love the fact that I can go there and pick them up, and just, I need 10 more, right? So,
I get that.
but
Mind you, it is,
I'm certain you could send it to him. Yeah.
well, it's UPS. I'm pretty sure we have one here in Sudbury.
Well, yeah, but every UPS it's a franchise, but they're individually owned.
Right.
And I know he bought machines that are not necessarily UPS, right? Like he has a
Right.
bookbinding machine that you're not going to find in every UPS store, but hopefully yours has one. So, yeah,
Well, it's something to check out from me here in Sudbury. So thanks for the information.
yeah, for sure. And
Good
the
to
other
know.
one that does them here is any, like, if you have any kind of print shop, ask them, because you might be surprised that they have the machines.
Yeah, we do have print shops. It's just that nothing is cheap anywhere, and always, if you're self-publishing, a bargain is a bargain.
Yeah,
Because
100%.
eventually you're going to have to pay for it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
All right. Brian has his hand up. Go ahead, Brian.
Yes, well, it's sort of a two-part question, or just a comment, really. I have written Memoir, a Nihilate story, which is still a manuscript.
Okay.
But my journey through it, I started writing and think, do I want to write this down for literally anybody to read? And I thought, and then I got to the point where, oh, I guess that's okay. Now, then, eventually towards the end of the book, it got to, I actually want people to read it.
Mhm.
Which is odd, and in still that ways, then I wrote it years ago, and I've been looking for it to do traditional publishing
yeah.
through, and it just can't find an agent at
Yeah.
all. And
Yeah.
I searched, but I would have, as my first book is self-published, not locally though, but I would not have thought of UPS
I know.
at all.
Sir. Yeah.
And I know David quite well.
Yeah.
I used to ship things from when I had my business in the 90s.
Yeah.
I used to ship things with David.
Yeah.
And so thank you for that information. I would never have thought of it.
I know I'm getting an email from David. What did you tell them, Sandy?
Okay.
But yeah, he does an amazing job. He's just got it down to a fine art now, like even as far as he knew Christmas was coming. So even before I asked for them, he started printing my books because he knew the orders were going to start coming in, right? So yeah, he's a really good businessman. You would know that. And now that he has that ability, why not support him, right? So yeah.
Okay, great.
Awesome.
Oh, Clayton.
This isn't a question. It's actually a comment because of some of the talk that's been going on here about the publishing. I've done self-publishing, publishing with like traditional publishing, and I work as a publisher. And one of the things that I did is I used local for Northwestern Ontario and sometimes Canada. My printer that I had was in Winnipeg because I was in Kenora at the time. And I also have a printer in the States that gives me, they have international locations. So I can have it printed in Australia or in the UK. And that way you get away from the shipping charges. And I think it's really, really important, especially as the shipping rates have gone right through the roof.
How do you find the quality?
Quality is absolutely perfect. I've never had a complaint, either with
Because
the
I know-
Winnipeg printer or with my international printer.
Yeah, I was talking more about the international ones because I know there's a lot of self-publishing companies out there, and what they are, what do they call them? Ego books or something along that line, right? Where they make the book, but they know no one's ever going to read it, and it's actually going to sit on a shelf. And if you actually did open it 4 or 5 times, it's going to fall apart. I can tell you from the abuse I've done to my books, they definitely don't fall apart. But that's something you have to definitely consider. So,
Well, I can let you know, I use Ingram. They're the biggest independent book distributor in North America. And I'm in one of their older programs. I don't think you could get into the program I'm in now, but I know they have all sorts of newer programs for people who like the digital publishing.
yeah.
And
Just to be clear, I don't pay for shipping. It's part of the buying the book, right?
well, that's
So
good for you. Yeah.
It's on my web, well, and that's the way it is for any product you buy, right? So my website is actually linked with Canada Post. So you put in, I have to put in the weight of every product, and based on what you buy, it can calculate to the penny what the shipping costs are going to be. And that's right up front when they purchase the book. So, yeah.
I use a flat rate.
Yeah, I used
Like
to.
I have an
I
international rate and a North American rate, and I build it into my costs, and it works quite well for me.
Yeah, I used to. I had to get away from that because when the costs started getting up, the flat rate wasn't working anymore. I was losing money. So now, and I love the transparency, right? This is not my cost. Here it's clearly Canada Post. This is what it's going to cost to get. So scream at them. Right. So, yeah.
Very good.
Awesome. Do I think you should write a book? Every single one of you, absolutely. Like, I get people asking me all the time, how do you write a book? And honestly, write it first. That is easily the biggest hurdle, is writing it. Everything else, the editing, publishing, you can figure that out. You can find people to help you. It is actually the sitting down and writing it where the wheels fall off the bus, right? So sit down and write it. Don't worry about editing till it's done. We get the perfectionist in us comes out and we're like, oh, that's garbage, and we're going to throw out that page. No, leave that page, write the next page and the next page. Editing is the next step. So, yeah. Right. Yes. Get it done. Right. And I think
I don't see any. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I know it sounds like I'm just blowing smoke up your butt, excuse the expression, but I honestly believe it's my teachings that if you have an interest or a calling to write a book, you should, because someone needs to read that. Right. And we tend to minimize our own journey. And it's like, oh, it's the same as everyone. That's why you have to write it, because someone out there is actually thinking they're the only one. Right. And that's so not. And like I said, if you can be brave enough to go to your authentic voice, we need to flood this world with authentic voices. We really do, because they're so refreshing. Right. So, yeah. Awesome.
Checking away there.
Can I make one last comment? I just got it. This is my personal kudos to Now. How do you pronounce it? N-O-W-W. Now. You guys wouldn't know this, but I had done 5 years in Toronto. I moved home after mom passed away. I moved home to finish my first book. My very first speaking engagement was a Now event where I was invited, and I didn't even have my book. I was holding the manuscript Honorary Indian because it was at the print shop, didn't get back in time for that event. And it was the very first time I shared some of the pages from Honorary Indian, a Now event. So that's why when I was asked, it's like, any day of the week I'm doing this event because this is where it all started for me. So thank you so, so much for inviting me back.
No
So,
problem. Yay.
yeah.
All right. Have we all gone silent? Time to no more questions. I don't know, Clayton, do you want?
I'm just saying, I threw my website into the chat. If anyone
Oh.
does want to check out my work
Oh,
or
there it
whatever
is.
I'm
Thank
doing,
you.
there
Yeah.
it is.
Oh, that's easy to remember. That's good.
Seriously. I'm the easiest person in the world to stalk. Remember my name. That's it. Yeah.
Anyways,
Well,
you want to wrap it up, Clayton?
I was just going to say, on behalf of Now, I am so glad that you came and spoke to us. And I think people who didn't come on missed something special.
Aw, thank you. Thank you. Awesome. Let me know when it goes up on your YouTube channel. I'm going to share it all over the free planet.
Okay. All right. We'll get on that.
Just subtle of me.
ASAP.
I'll make sure you get it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm gonna stop recording now. There's good. There's some thank yous.